I'm Ed Larson with Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's, the divisional merchandise manager over the hunting division. I've been hunting turkeys now for about 30 years and have learned a lot spending all that time in the woods about the different calling techniques, calling styles, and different call types. A lot of times when a new turkey hunter wants to get started, one of the most intimidating, aspects of turkey hunting is the turkey calling side. And I guess what I want to do is really break down how simple it can be and how complex it can be, just to kind of break down those barriers to entry for the new turkey hunter especially. So there's basically two types of turkey calls. You have reeded or air-blown turkey calls, or what we call a mouth diaphragm call. There's a few other air-style calls. They call them like a trumpet call or a wing bone call. And then predominantly it's friction calls outside of that. So a friction call is exactly what it sounds like. It's two surfaces rubbing together. The most common types of friction calls are box calls, what we call a pot call or a slate and a peg style call, and then a push pin call, which would be this call here. And for new turkey hunters, how do you get started, right? So one of the most popular calls that we sell at Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's for new turkey callers or turkey hunters is this push pin style call. And what makes a push pin style call so easy to use is literally that's all you're doing. So the call is comprised of a box, a sliding peg and surface. There's a peg on the backside to create the friction, and then there's a spring-loaded plunger. So literally, if you can do this with your index finger, you can call turkeys, and it sounds like this. And that's mimicking the yelp of a hen, which is, again, the most common sound that a hen turkey makes. But so when it comes to wanting to get started, man, I can't call turkeys. If you can do this, you can call turkeys, which is fantastic. The key, though, is to get the cadence down right. So a wild turkey hen generally is a very rhythmic, I would say, speaker or vocalizer. So when you're doing your yelps, just make sure that you're doing them in somewhat of a rhythm. But again, real simple call to use, just your index finger. And as you step up into more, I would say, advanced calls, the next call, another friction call, is the box call. And this box call that we're going to talk about now is our Ozark Bottoms waterproof box call. And that's one disadvantage of friction calls, especially calls that are made out of wood, is that moisture will affect them and affect their sound, because you've got to create that friction. And if stuff's wet, you're not getting that friction. Now this call is coated to make sure that it remains waterproof and will create that friction, but with a box call, any of the box calls that are on the market, you simply hold it with one hand underneath the box, and you've got this paddle that slides across the surface, and as you slide the paddle across the surface, it'll make a hen turkey sound. So all you're doing is sliding it across, one way or the other. And now to make that into a yelp, you just speed up the pace a little bit, and it sounds like this. And one thing to remember when you use a box call, a lot of people will pick the paddle up between yelps. And you don't have to do that. It's only making the sound go in one direction, so you keep the paddle firmly down on the top of the box call. So slide it down, it'll yelp, and as I go backwards, it's silent. But again, a simple call to use. Maybe not quite as simple as the push pin call, but a real easy call to use to make some very realistic yelps. And there's a lot of very experienced turkey hunters and turkey callers that will say if you're ever going to fool them in the woods, for them to think that you're a real turkey, it's usually with a box call. And again, a real easy call to use. Not super versatile when it comes to the range of sounds that you can make. As we go up through the different types of calls to more advanced calling, that's when things can get a little bit more versatile and allow you to create more sounds and sounds like multiple turkeys. But the basic hen yelp is really easy on a box call. You can also do what we call a cluck or a cut on a box call. And the easiest way to do that is simply take your thumb and set it on the side of the lid of the box call, or on the top of the box there. And you hold the paddle about like that. And if you just pop this with your hand, it lets you create those clucks and cuts that a hen makes. They, again, sound really good, but it allows you to do some very clean, very realistic yelps and some cuts. The other sound that turkeys make when they feed is called a purr, much more difficult on a call like this, but it can be done. It's just a little bit more advanced. And I don't think it sounds near as good as what it does on some other calls that are out there. But that's the second type of call. So you've got your push pin call, then we get into the box call. And the next type of call is what we call a pot call, and a lot of people just refer to them as slate calls because the first versions of calls like this were created with a slate surface and a peg. And I jokingly tell people that it's literally fingernails on a chalkboard, a slate chalkboard, and that's how you make these sounds. So, and some, there's multiple surfaces. This happens to be a glass call. There's calls that have crystal, slate, aluminum, different surfaces that create different sounds, different pitches of sounds. But one of the most important things you got to remember, don't forget these things are called friction calls. And without friction, you can't make the sound. So if you can see on this call, that one side of this call has been really roughed up and scratched up. We use sandpaper or Brillo pad or a stone to create that kind of roughing of the surface, where this side is clear. So if you buy a new call that's a glass or a crystal call, generally it'll come with a very, very clean surface like that. And if you take it out of the package and you try to use it, it doesn't make any noise, right? So you don't return it, just go through the process of resurfacing it. It might not look as pretty as what it does when you first start, but when you try to run this call on the clean side, it makes no noise. When you go up to the side where it's been conditioned, it sounds like this. So you're creating that friction. And it's an easy call once you figure out the right angle for the peg or for your striker on the surface of the call to create that friction. So what I tell people to do, and I'm happen to be left-handed, but hold it like you'd hold a pencil and hold it on that surface exactly perpendicular. So the striker is perpendicular to the slate, and then tip it away from you about 10 degrees. So if you can see, it's tipped away about 10 degrees, and then just make small circles. And that'll get you your basic yelp of the hen. Now with a slate style call or a pot call, again, this is a glass surface, and I've got one also that's an aluminum surface just to hear the difference that you get out of the sound of the call based on this being aluminum versus glass, or just a different surface type. So this is an aluminum call here. It's higher pitched, it's got that growl or what we call rasp in the call as well, which just sounds like an older hen. But yeah, the basics of running a slate call or a pot style call is simply, again, hold that like a pencil. Don't ever, because as you hold the pot itself, you can see that there's holes in the bottom, and the holes allow the sound to escape. So if I hold the call like this and use it, and if I hold the call flat on my palm and I cover up those ports, it's a much different sound. So more advanced turkey callers will use that to their advantage if they want to quiet the call down or whatever. But generally speaking, you want to hold the call kind of on the tips of your fingers, like this, that way you're not really impeding those sound ports on the bottom. So hold it like this or whatever's comfortable for you, and then make those small circles with that peg straight up and down, and then 10 degrees straight away. Make those little circles. Circles or ovals. And then to purr, to cluck, you can do some more advanced sounds on a pot style call. So to make those purr and cluck sounds, you hold the peg again straight up and down, that same angle we talked about. Because if I lose the angle, there's the wrong angle. Here's the correct thing. Here's the difference. So that angle makes all the difference to create that friction. So to make a purr or a cluck sound, again, the peg straight up and down, tip it away from you, and then just slowly drag it across the surface. And what that peg's doing, it's just hopping as you're dragging it across the surface. So you have to experiment with the amount of pressure, because if you're too light, if you're too hard, so you kind of have to get the pressure just about right. And then from that same position, if you want to create the cluck or the cut sound, you press straight down and you pop that striker towards you. And that's the cluck of a hen or the cut of an excited hen. Then I get into the other style calls, which I would call a little bit more advanced, and that's the mouth call. Because the one thing that all these calls have in common is they require movement, visible movement for you to be able to operate them. Whether it's subtle movement with your hands, a little bit greater movement with your, on the box call to run that paddle across. The benefit of of a mouth call is there's literally no movement except what little bit you're doing with your mouth. So when you first get your mouth call, there's a lot of hunters that will first put it in their mouth and they'll gag on it, or they'll have a bad experience just getting it comfortable in their mouth. So that's the first step. So when you put a call in your mouth, it's kind of like a horseshoe shape. So you want that horseshoe facing out, and if the reed has some cuts in it, those cuts, which create some of the rasp and the distinguishing sound differences between the different types of mouth calls, that cut reed is to the top. And if you have a narrower palate or a different palate, because we're not all built alike, unfortunately, you can bend these calls slightly so it fits more comfortably. You can take a scissors and slowly trim that tape that's holding this call together so it doesn't go as far back in your throat or cut you on the sides of your palate as well. But when you cut one of these with a scissors, just make sure you take off a little tiny bit at a time and put it back in your mouth and try it just so it's comfortable. Then once it's comfortable in your mouth, that's when you can start to try to make some sounds. Generally what we tell people to do when you first get one, put it in your mouth, press the fat part of your tongue, because the tip of your tongue, it'll tickle and be uncomfortable, but the fat part of your tongue, and say the word chick or chuck. So it's chick, 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 chick. And the CH is forcing the pressure of your tongue up against these reeds, which is making the sound. And the UCK on the backside of the ICK on chick, that CK sound, causes your tongue to kind of drop off and cut the sound off. And I'll just give you what that sounds like. I made a slight bend to this call. I've got the horseshoe facing out and I've got my cut reed up. So I'll put that in my mouth and say chick and then chuck. And again, the first step, get comfortable. The second step is just make noise. Now with a mouth call, a lot of times you could be sitting down against a tree with your shotgun on your knee, kind of pointed towards the direction that turkey's coming from. And with a mouth call in your mouth, I can have both hands on my gun, be aiming, and still call without having to make any additional movement. Where if I had a friction call like this, I got both my hands on the shotgun, I gotta like put the gun down or figure something out to be able to make that call if I need to call to that turkey again, which turkey's eyesight is crazy good. Their hearing is incredible. That's why once you've progressed and you've got into turkey calling a little bit, I strongly suggest being able to figure out how to use a mouth call for those types of settings. But at the end of the day, a mouth call, I believe, is one of the most realistic and most versatile calls out there. It just takes much more time to master. So as you get started, I would recommend starting with push pins and box calls once you get going, but don't be afraid to buy the mouth calls and buy the pot calls or the slate calls and start to practice with those and get comfortable with them. So as you go to the woods the first year with your push pin or box call, continue to practice in the truck on the way to the woods or at home. I just want to show you one more thing on this mouth call, just the wide range of sounds you can make on it, and then we'll kind of talk about an overall summary of some calls and some locator calls. So this is the mouth call. We're going to do some yelps, some clucks, some purrs, and just some more advanced calling. But you can see how much more you can do on a mouth call than what you can do on a push pin, box, or even a slate call. You know, the last type of turkey call that we have up here isn't even a turkey call. It's an owl call. So a lot of new turkey hunters are like, well, owl calls and crow, what's all this stuff about? Well, a turkey will shock gobble in the springtime, meaning they're looking for any excuse to gobble to make their location known to attract hens. So they'll gobble at any loud noises. And some of the most common sounds that they hear in the spring woods, especially right at daybreak, are things like owls, coyotes, crows right at daybreak, geese honking, any type of loud noise that will kind of shock that turkey into gobbling. And a barred owl call is probably the most popular locator call, most effective in the early morning hours, just as turkeys are waking up. But that sounds like this. And what you're saying into that call is the cadence, who cooks for you all. So if you can remember that, who cooks for you Who cooks for you all? That's the cadence you want to do on a owl hooter, and it sounds like this. And a lot of times turkeys will respond to that, give away their location. And the benefit of using a locator call versus a turkey call is you can make that turkey gobble without him thinking you're another turkey. Allows you to kind of make your setup. So you can sneak in on that turkey, locate him with a very neutral sound, like an owl hooter or crow call or a coyote howler, and kind of slide in and make your setup knowing where that turkey's at in the tree before he flies down. So, and just a little bit more advanced sound on an owl call. If he doesn't respond to that, who cooks for you all, you can do things that are called laughing and screaming, all sorts of different sounds on this thing, but kind of to ratchet up the intensity to shock that turkey into gobbling. So I'll do the basic who cooks for you all cadence, and I'll just ratchet it up a little bit. So kind of the more aggressive you get, and if he doesn't respond to that, he's probably not going to gobble.